Despite a scintillating start to the 2021-22 season, the biggest story in football this campaign has come off the pitch: the purchase of Newcastle United by the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia. The move has made the Magpies the richest club in the world, with around £360 billion behind them, and has already prompted talk that stars like Martial, Sterling or even Mbappe could find themselves looking for houses in the northeast next summer, as the Toons seek a return to the heights they hit in the 90s, when they were among the dominant sides in England. But the takeover raises other questions too. The Premier League had rejected a Saudi bid for Newcastle back in 2020, but this time declared that they were content to let it go through, sparking protests from human rights campaigners, fans, and even other clubs. So what exactly changed? Are there restrictions on who can purchase a team, and what makes it so complicated? Today on FD Explained, we examine how you buy a football club. The first thing you have to do, after making $1 billion or so, is figure out where you might be able to spend that money. If you're looking at Bundesliga sponsorship deals and stadium attendance and licking your lips, you still won't be able to get your hands on more than 49% of those euros, thanks to the 50+1 rule, which ensures clubs are majority owned by fans. This means those teams are governed by a board of directors elected by members, and as a result, any new investor will have their say diluted by the larger body of supporters, meaning that while Allianz, Audi and Adidas share 25% of Bayern Munich, they can't simply do whatever they want. Thankfully for board plutocrats, other leagues are much more relaxed about ownership, and so long as the money hose is pumping, they don't much care where the other end is. But if you want to buy a Premier League club, you still have to do some digging to determine whether anything is on the market or could potentially be on the market. Only 9 of the current 20 Premier League sides changed majority shareholder in the last 10 years. And while that shows sales aren't exactly rare, they aren't exactly common either. According to Adam Crafton writing in The Athletic, as few as 5% of people interested in buying a football club will actually end up doing so. And scarcity is a large part of that, but not the only part. These days, most bidders use boutique investment banks or sports advisors to sound out the market before selecting a target, and those firms make clear how hard the process will be. In 2019, Forbes magazine spoke to a partner at New York investment bank Inner Circle Sports, which helped broker the sales of Liverpool and Inter Milan, and he explained how the first step is teaching buyers what to expect. We spend a lot of time educating people on how player transfers work, how financial fair play works, how dealing with agents works, and always how relegation works. We have what we refer to as Football 101, and we take potential investors through it. We really explain to them this is how it actually works. This helps weed out the time wasters too. Despite what you'd expect given the money in the sport, the process of buying a team is not always professional or methodical, with super wealthy people preferring to test the waters through sending a friend or relative to an advisor, who then sounds out potential selling clubs. At other times, a deal can be match-made by a broker looking for a percentage of the purchase price, and only once a willing buyer and a relatively willing seller make themselves known can things go up a notch. Once a club suggests itself, it's time for the buyer to check out the financial landscape around it. That includes the state of the academy, whether the stadium or training ground are owned by third parties, and any unexplored revenue opportunities. But it also takes into account larger considerations, like the league's media strategy and system of governance, which will affect the value of the side in the future. Complicating the situation for some clubs is public trading. Teams like Manchester United have previously made shares available for purchase on the stock exchange, and so when the Glazers began buying bits of the Red Devils, they knew that when they hit 30% ownership, UK law would force them to make a takeover bid. They then had to rack up another 45% of the shares before they were able to take the club off the stock exchange, making the journey between their initial 3% purchase and complete private ownership more than 2 years long. There's also debt to consider. Often a large part of the cost of the club is not the price, but the debt that comes with it, and new owners need to factor in whether they can pay these off in a big initial lump or refinance them over a longer period. For example, when FSG bought Liverpool, the Reds were spending £100,000 a day simply servicing their existing debts, while former Chelsea chairman Ken Bates was able to purchase the Stamford Bridge outfit in 1982 for just £1, but also had to take on the £1.5 million they owed. Given all these potential difficulties, many buyers prefer to work as a consortium. This is a group of investors sharing the cost and responsibility among them, and while that reduces profits for individuals, it also means they're less likely to become targets of fan hatred and will lose less if the club is relegated. So let's assume you've found a club you want to buy, and you've worked out a valuation with the current proprietors. The next step might be to soften the ground with supporters. Interest in a takeover is usually leaked fairly early in the process, but it makes sense to try and get club legends on board, who can then sell you to fans as a good custodian for the side. For example, when Spotify billionaire Daniel Ek revealed his desire to buy Arsenal back in the spring, his first job was convincing Thierry Henry to join his bid, with the Frenchman since working as a spokesman for the move in the press. If the charm offensive goes well, fan sentiment can swing in your favour. But, unfortunately, that's only the beginning, as next comes the hard work, crunching the numbers. While you can learn a reasonable amount about a club's financial situation from the outside, it's only after you have a bid accepted that you can get access to the books and check you're not walking into a disaster. Clubs have contracts with players and managers, but also with a million other business partners and employees, from landlords to the people selling pies on match days. And because transfer fees are normally amortized, spread across the life of the player's deal, they usually both owe and are owed millions of pounds on players bought and sold under the previous regime. All this information is stored in what is sometimes called the data room of the club, and prospective buyers need to weigh what they find there against their own aspirations. A side like Brentford aims to improve slowly over time using a player trading model, buying youngsters on the cheap and selling them when they become stars at a profit. This approach has the advantage of keeping finances strong, and from time to time can produce a special crop of footballers who are capable of bringing in silverware, like Monaco in 2016-17 or Lille last year. However, 1. Most of the time the team will be in a state of flux, which can test the patience of fans and managers. 2. A few poor signings can undo years of good work. And 3. The system is much harder to use in the Prem than in France or Germany, as English clubs tend to pay larger transfer fees and there aren't many sides richer than you to whom you can sell your products. In the case of the Glazers at Manchester United, achievement on the pitch is only interesting as a driver of commercial performance, and the team is really a tool used to generate sponsorships and maximise revenue, so the owners can take cash out of the club without performance tanking. And for owners like Sheikh Mansour or the PIF, the chessboard is even larger. These investors are not concerned with football or even revenue, but with purchasing soft power. That is, gaining sympathy from fans and the media through investment and success on the field, with the goal of improving the global standing of the sovereign states they represent. You only need to look at the maths to see that the PIF is not interested in profit at Newcastle. The reported £305 million purchase cost is nothing to them, under 0.1% of the total value of the fund. And if they spend £200 million in the next 2 windows, as has been suggested, they'd need to make a £50 million profit every year for the next decade just to break even. So they're not really investing money with the hope of seeing a financial return, but are buying something else, a better reputation. While the buyers are doing their due diligence, they themselves come under scrutiny. The source of their funds will be checked to make sure they can pay the price they've agreed, and they're required to provide a business model indicating how they intend to run the club over the next 2 years. Then comes the bit you've heard about, the Premier League's fit and proper owner test, which includes a list of disqualifying events, any one of which will stop the takeover going through. Disqualifying events. A buyer fails the test if they have power or influence over another football league club, they hold a significant interest in another football league club, they become prohibited by law from being a director, they're filing for bankruptcy, they have been director of a club while it has suffered 2 or more unconnected events of insolvency, they have been a director of 2 or more clubs which, while they have been director, have suffered an event of insolvency. The focus here is entirely on financial and legal issues, to prevent unscrupulous buyers from destroying a club through fiscal malpractice, rather than whether the new owner might, say, be the leader of a state notorious for human rights abuses. As a consequence, it's basically impossible to fail this test, as demonstrated by Thaksin Shinawatra, the former Thai Prime Minister, who was able to buy Manchester City in 2007 despite being in exile from his country following a military coup and facing accusations of financial wrongdoing, treason and press censorship. This year, the Premier League okayed the Public Investment Fund's purchase of Newcastle after receiving legally binding assurances that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia will not control Newcastle United Football Club. A hard line to swallow, given that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is the chair of the PIF's board. But now there's growing pressure to reform the system. At a recent meeting of Premier League clubs, multiple executives expressed disappointment at the division's decision to allow the Newcastle takeover, while 18 of the league sides voted to suspend sponsorship deals linked to club owners, amid fears that the PIF could juice up commercial contracts in Saudi Arabia to get around financial fair play regulations. Of course, this isn't all about morality. Investors don't want to go up against richer teams who could push them down the table and devalue their product. But for those of us concerned about the game's future and who believe in its power to do good, It's time to make clear that winning isn't all that counts, that trophies don't trump people, and that if the Premier League won't draw the line somewhere, we will. So that's our take on the mechanics of buying a football club and the issues around it, but let us know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, drop us a like and subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and you'll never miss an upload. We'll see you next time.